I'm going to be reading a scary story to help you relax and fall asleep. I hope you like it. It's called The Darkness, Part 11. That afternoon, the tension in the house was as thick as an oil spill. The guys were agitated after what took place that morning. After Steve left for reasons unknown to them, the yelling continued inside the house. They remarkably got rid of Steve, but no one knew when he would unexpectedly return, and this already created a lot of tension. Sean and Mark shouted at Jay because he took so long to answer Steve when he had maliciously enticed him to join him in kidnapping Dia. Usually, Jay was the peacekeeper in all the fights, but this time he fought back. He rolled his sleeves, and little beads of sweat were starting to form on his forehead. Dia looked startled. Everything escalated so quickly. Mark and Jay were inches from each other's face, yelling. Mark's cheeks were turning red, and he was breathing heavily. Sean glared at Jay and was about to grab an empty bottle of Merlot and hit him on the head with it. She decided to put a stop to it. The last thing she wanted was for their house to turn into an abattoir. She walked over to them and yelled, "Enough! He will come back for me, and we need to work together to stop him. This for sure isn't a good time to be fighting each other. That would make no sense." She grabbed the bottle, moving it away from Sean. Then she put her hands on Mark's waist, gently moving him away from Jay. "She's right," Mark said quietly, backing away from Dia. "We need to come up with a plan." She must have still felt very hot to him because he reached a hand under his shirt to rub his stomach. "Oh, sorry, I forgot," Dia said with a grimace, clenching her hands together. "It's okay," Mark said, focusing his gaze on Jay. Dia walked over to the sink and ran cold water on her hands. She couldn't accept the thought of her hands being hot as coals of glowing fire to them. "Dia, that won't help. You just have to wait," Jay said. Dia grabbed a towel to dry her hands. "It's weird, 'cause they feel normal to me, just a little warm," she said, looking puzzled. "Because it's not your skin. It's an energy field inside of you," Jay said. "I think we need to move," Sean said. "No, we can, but he'll just follow us anywhere we go, so that's not going to solve anything," Mark said. "It will buy us some time." "It won't, Sean," Mark said, raising his voice. "What about an offering?" Sean suggested. "He's not going to take an offering over her. I still don't understand why he just left," Jay said, and they all looked at Dia. "Dia, when we were arguing, he started looking at you. Is he able to read your thoughts?" Mark asked. Dia paused for a moment, then slowly nodded. "Why didn't you say anything?" Jay said, throwing up his hands in frustration. Mark signaled him to stop talking. Can you read his thoughts? Mark asked. No, but I can talk to him, she said quietly. Mark was standing directly in front of her. Dia had her arms folded. She lowered her eyes and looked at the ground. Sean was standing to her right, watching. She could smell a sweet cinnamon candy he was eating. Jay was standing to her left, his eyes fixated on her, waiting for her to tell them. Dia's mouth went dry, and she picked nervously at her nails. Diane, you need to tell us everything that he said to you, Mark said, smiling. Sean bit into his candy, and Jay cleared his throat. Dia lifted her deep, expressive eyes to look at him and said, He told me many things. He told me not to trust any of you. And he told me that you purposely drank a lot of my blood that day to keep me from remembering anything. He saw everything. He was watching. He told me I'm a sun child and that my power intensifies when he's around. This morning, I thought he was going to burn you and take me, so I asked him to wait, but he will come back. When she was done telling them, a cool breeze entered the room through an open window, giving her goosebumps. Mark's smile had faded. Jay's face tightened. Sean was done eating his candy and now stared at her with a blank look on his face. I never got to ask him, though, Dia continued. What is a sun child? Do you know? Sean nodded. We know what it is, Mark said. Dia lifted both eyebrows in shock and said, Tell me, please. I'll tell her, Jay said, clearing his throat. There was an early ancient Egyptian group. I guess it would be similar to what you would call a religion. They practiced sun worshipping, amongst other things, and that's where the term originated. I watched them do amazing things in connection with the sun, kind of like what you and Steve did. Their rituals allowed us to exist and be healthy. We flourished together. We were unstoppable. There were rules that needed to be followed. And whenever we killed someone, accidental or intentional, that wasn't part of a ritual, it weakened us. That's why when I accidentally killed Alex, I needed your help. Dia pointed at herself and said, I don't understand. What do I have to do with any of that? You're one of them, Jay said. Like reincarnated? Dia asked, staring at him in disbelief. Just like it, he answered. Dia sat in the living room. They followed her and sat with her. She stared at the ceiling for a moment, processing everything. The silence pulsed in her ears. And why have I never heard any of this? Why keep it a secret from me? She asked. We were trying to protect you, Mark said. By drinking a lot of your blood to keep you from remembering, we felt that by debilitating you, your power would remain a secret. We were trying not to get anybody's attention like Steve's. Your ability didn't start until later in your life, and that's when we found you. At least it was before he did. Clearly, all it did was buy us some time, Sean said. And what kind of life did I have there, she asked. In that world, your family had a lot of power. You were a princess. That makes perfect sense. He called me little princess, Dia interrupted. The guys looked at each other for a moment. Then Mark continued. Steve really wanted you, and he broke a very important rule. He killed one of you, a son child that was very close to you, and tried to protect you and keep Steve away from you. But when Steve killed him, it made him very weak, weak enough for us to take you. And who is Steve to you? Dia asked. Mark looked at the floor. Sean furrowed his brows and said, He's our brother. From another mother, Jay said with a smile and a wink. Sean and Jay just laughed. Dia shook her head and rolled her eyes. You're kidding, right? Wow, I have so many questions now, she said. So why can Steve do certain things you can't? And what sort of relationship did I have with you guys there? Also, what else did the Sun children practice? Mark sighed. We will answer these questions, I promise, Dia, but not right now, he said. Why not? She said anxiously. Because you're not going to like the answer, Sean said. Dia agreed to wait. The rest of the day, they interacted rather peacefully with each other. The intense emotions from earlier that day dissipated. They stayed indoors. Dia took a long, hot shower to help her relax. Mark read a book. Jay listened to music and smoked a cigar. Sean watched Dia as she prepared dinner. They had given their housekeeper the day off. During dinner, they didn't talk about Steve or Dia's past life. Afterwards, Sean stayed by Dia's side as she cleaned up. That night, the crisp, cool air moved its way in through the windows as it waved the curtains. It ran through Dia's hair and nightgown as she stood there looking out. The sky was brightly lit with stars. She stood still and breathed deep as the nighttime air freshened her skin. Mark wrapped his arms around her. Her skin felt very warm, but not uncomfortable anymore. I wish today had gone differently, she cried softly. Mark nodded. Then he laid her down in bed. She pressed her body against his, and he carefully sank his teeth into her neck. His hand gripped her waist tightly. Her warm blood generously emptied its way out of her as Mark drank her in. After he whispered quietly, "Go to sleep, Dia,"